And you were listening to Season 6 of the award-winning Christian Outdoors podcast with your host, Pete Rogers. And you are listening to Christian Outdoors podcast, and I'm Pete Rogers, your host. If you've listened to this show for very long or even just tuned in, you know by now that I am a trapper for the United States Department of Agriculture here in South Carolina, and trapping is a passion of mine and something I really enjoy. You know, hunting, fishing, trapping, hiking, camping, backpacking, anything that gets us outdoors is what we want to talk about here on Christian Outdoors podcast. And today I have with me a gentleman who is a commercial trapper, owner, operator of Coastal Land and Wildlife Services here in South Carolina. I stumbled upon his YouTube channel a few weeks ago, and I noticed he was doing really good instruction videos on the art and the skill of trapping, but also his faith was very evident in his presentations there on his YouTube channel. His name's Bill Smith, 38 years old, has two boys, and is married to Amber Smith for 15 years. They live in a small town in South Carolina. And as he says, he grew up going to church, but really didn't become a Christian until 2014. And we're going to hear about that in just a little bit. But when he's not trapping, he's also the defensive line coach for a high school that just won the state championship. He didn't give me the name of the school. We'll find that out in just a minute. But Bill Smith will be joining us here from Coastal Land and Wildlife Services. All right, everyone, as I said in the introduction, today we have with me Mr. Bill Smith, who is the trapper extraordinaire. He is a catcher of all critters, four-legged and two. He must because he has a wife. And so we'll give him that. But he's the owner of Coastal Land, and I knew I'd mess it up. Coastal Land and Wildlife Services.
Yes, sir. That's it.
I knew I should have written it down. Anyway, I found him on YouTube. I like to watch trapping videos on YouTube as a trapper myself. I'm always learning something from other trappers. And so I was scrolling through the YouTube looking for specific sets that I've been trying to master. And I stumbled across your YouTube channel, Bill. And I said, I got to get this guy on the show. And so thank you for joining me here on Christian Outdoors. Why don't you start by tell the listeners about yourself and a little bit about what you do, and then we'll dive into the details.
Okay. So for about 4 years now, I've been trapping full time, running my own business. Primarily trap the bigger, like private quail plantations. Just do control on most of them. I trap almost all of them in our local area. Usually run traps from September 1st to about June, and I get a couple month break in there to do some other type of work. And man, I just full-time trapping. That's it. But I mean, we specialize in coyotes and do a little bit of everything.
Okay. Well, you hit some interesting things. So we have some listeners who may not know what quail plantations are. So let's describe that so that they know what we're talking about. Are these the put and take places, or these private places that are trying to raise wild quail, or is it both? Kind of explain that a little bit.
If you want to call it put and take, you can, but it's more of an early release. So around that September, October mark every year, these plantations will release several thousand quail.
Okay. So they're pen raised quail that are released in mass numbers.
Right. They give them a month or two, sometimes more, to kind of acclimate and get a little wild, as wild as they're going to be for a pen raised bird. And then they hunt them throughout the season. And some places do supplemental releases throughout the season, just depending on their bird numbers, are up, down, what kind of weather we've had and things like that. And, but yeah, they're all early release plantations.
Okay.
And some of the birds carry over, to the next year, and they raise, and there are a few wild quail out there, but I don't know what happened to wild quail around here, man. When I was a kid, there was wild quail, and then all of a sudden there wasn't.
Same. There's been a lot of studies about that. I've actually had some biologists on the show that we talked about a couple of years ago. And just real quickly, the way the farming practices have changed, where now they're planting from the edge of the ditch all the way to the edge of the trees. They've taken away all the quail habitat from where it used to be. And that is the biggest impact on quail, is they need that edge cover.
Right.
They need that 20, 30 foot cover on the edge of the fields that used to be there when they plowed with mules.
Right.
and before that. And if they don't have that low, thick cover, they just can't survive. They just,
Right.
I mean, that's their nesting grounds, their feeding grounds, their everything. Um, that's one of the biggest things. But so as we're talking about, I want to kind of focus on that real quick, the quail protection. And as a trapper myself and a dedicated turkey hunter, one of the things that I have hit hard in the last 15 years is nest predators. So
Right.
let's talk about nest predators first, and then we'll get into into the bigger predators. So for the listener, a nest predator here in South Carolina will be a raccoon. Raccoon. What kind of a name is that? Raccoon, a possum, a skunk, and that's pretty much it. Armadillos, which we have a lot of, are not really a huge enough threat to even be considered.
Yeah.
And there's other things. I mean, a wild pig, if he stumbles on a nest, he's going to eat it, but he's not actually a nest predator. It's the raccoon, the possum, and the skunk are the main ones. So, do you target nest predators specifically in doing this?
Yeah. No, most of the places I trap do want me to take out nest predators. And some places get a little, in my opinion, they get a little too focused on the bigger stuff, the coyotes and the bobcats. But I do try to target nest predators as much as I can. And like I was saying, I read a study somewhere a few years ago, and I can't remember if it was Georgia or South Carolina had done this study, and it would, I think the number was something like 76 or 78% of nest predation was from raccoons and possums. And we
Yes.
don't get
Yes.
skunks in the area. I mean, we will on the rare occasion have a skunk pass through, but that's just not a problem
Yeah.
for where I am.
Yeah. Because you're in the sandy land, and skunks don't like sand land. They're more up kind of where I am and north of me. But anyway, so
Right.
raccoons and possums. Yeah. Yeah. How do you target them?
Dog proofs, man. That's I recommend that to everybody that everybody I trap for. I've even had some places that I've given them a couple of dozen dog proof traps when I get done, and I tell them like, look, if you got a Friday and a Saturday night to come set these traps, set them. You know, one or two is better than none. Um,
Yep. Yep.
I try to feeders, ditches, ponds, little wetland areas, stuff like that, and you mostly catch raccoons in them. You'll catch a possum every once in a while, but I mean, for instance, one place I trapped 2 years ago, I ran dog proofs. I ran 3 dozen dog proofs on a place about 2,200 acres for 3 weeks. Just ran them on the feeders, and I caught 155 raccoons out of that place.
Good
Uh, in
gracious.
with
3 weeks.
3 dozen weeks. Yeah, about 50
Wow.
raccoons a week.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's a lot.
that's a lot.
Well,
Yeah,
and I had a biologist on here not too long ago. We were talking about actually supplemental feeding deer, and he was talking about how we are just really feeding the raccoon population. I mean, they just if you put out any kind of supplemental feed for deer or bait, whatever you want to call it, corn or protein, whatever, you're going to be attracting raccoons in mass. And if you're like me and you have a camera on it, you say, I got 11 raccoons on this one feeder,
yeah.
and you just it's unbelievable. And I don't mean to do all the talking. This is about your show, but
No,
I'm just passionate about trapping, so I'm gonna be talking.
yeah,
Um, and I'm much older than you, but I can remember when everybody coon hunted and they killed every coon they treed. Now no one coon hunts, and the ones that do don't shoot them so they can run them again
yeah,
tomorrow. So we
right.
have a plethora of raccoons.
Yeah, yeah. Things have kind of gotten, I guess, more sporting, than they used to be. As far as like you said, let's leave the raccoon so we can come back and get him again tomorrow and run him again. I'm
Yeah,
like, no,
yeah,
killing
yeah.
these kids.
150 raccoons on 3 dozen traps. That's 36 traps for you people who struggle with math. Um, and I run dog proofs. I like a Z trap. I also have coon daggers. Those are the two that I go to the most. And I'm gonna tell you, this is my age. I love the Z trap because I have the white ones. I can find them.
Yeah. Oh, I flag everything. I got flagging all throughout the woods. People are like, "How do you catch coyotes and this stuff?" I'm like, they must not care about it, but it makes my life a lot easier trying to find them when I'm out checking.
Yeah, it does, because when you're running that many, you forget. I know it's right here
Yeah,
somewhere, and if it's a well placed trap, it's going to be hard to see. Yeah, it's really hard to see. But I like the white dog proof Z trap is my go to trap.
yeah,
And I don't mind telling people what I bait it with. I use small marshmallows underneath the trigger and dry cat food on top. That's what I do.
yeah.
You mind
I'm a
sharing? Go ahead.
corn and fish. Corn and fish oil is my go-to, and
Okay.
mostly because I run them on a bunch of feeders. So I mean, they're already eating corn, and I just drizzle that fish oil in there, just kind of a sweeten the pot a little bit, you know.
Yeah, so you
Uh,
put some just whole shell corn in your trap and a
yeah,
little bit of fish oil.
yep. And I've used all kind of stuff. I've used marshmallows. I've used sweet feed and uh, grapes. I trapped a wine vineyard one time, and so I took marshmallows and grapes and mashed them all up and put some
Yeah,
dry in there to kind of pack them up. Made little pellets and just stuck them
yeah,
down in there and whacked them pretty
yeah,
good on out. I mean, you know, a coon will eat anything.
yeah.
All it's
It
got to
will.
do is stink. They'll eat it.
You just gotta be able to smell it and find it, and but they got a great nose too, so and the fish
Oh,
oil helps with that. I use in order to enhance the smell of my stuff, I use fruit punch Kool-Aid powder in my cat
right.
food,
Yeah.
and I mean everybody's done that. Grape Kool-Aid, whatever, it's
Oh,
whatever
yeah.
Dollar General has on sale.
That's
That's
right.
what I
That's
get.
right. Cheap
That's what I
packs of
get.
cool.
Yeah, just mix it with the dry cat food, and it has a very strong smell, and just put it in there, spill a little bit, and keep on trucking. And
Yeah.
the dog proof is just such a great trap.
It's so easy, man. And I tell people that it's a skillless trapping. Like you
Mhm.
don't have to know anything about trapping. All you got to do is be able to set that trap and stick it in the ground, and you don't have to worry about scent proofing and gloves and bedding
That's
and
right.
all. It's stick it in the ground and go.
Yep, they
And
don't
that's
care.
like I say, I try to get all those places to run as many as they can, a couple dozen, whatever it is.
Mhm.
And a lot of times I'll tell them like, if you'll run these for a few weeks before I come, we might be able to catch more coyotes and bobcats and fox and things. Because the first week, you know, on a trap line, the first week you got to get through all the trash. You got to get through the possums and the coons and everything like that, because they're gonna.
Mhm.
You could set a trap in the middle of I-95 and a raccoon's gonna find it before anything else does.
Yep, yep. I obviously have a possum plague here where I'm at. I've on this little 200 acres, I've caught 27 possums this year.
Jeez.
And yeah, I know 27 possums, and I'm only running 10 dog proofs, but I'm
Yeah.
catching them in my coyote sets and in my bobcat sets and everything else too. I
Oh,
caught
yeah.
27 possums, only 14 coons, and but I've been hammering the coons hard for years here,
Right.
and so but I don't know where the possums are coming from, but it's unbelievable. I mean, I'm like,
Yeah.
good gosh, the daggum possums,
Yeah. They just don't
but
quit.
no, no, they don't, and they have a lot of babies as
Yeah.
opposed to a coon that have two or three. A possum may have 8 or 10.
Yeah.
You
Yep.
know?
I, I've
All
found
right.
them carry backs before, and they'll have a dozen. You know,
Mhm.
walk woods with a dozen babies hanging off their backs. And I'm like, good
That's right.
lord,
That's
possums.
right. So so if somebody is trying to trap nest predators, Bill, and they don't have feeders that are already attracting the coons, can you mind
Mhm.
just breaking that down to somebody who's listening and maybe wants to get started in it?
Yeah. If you don't have feeders, bait piles, or corn piles, or whatever, if you have ditches, culvert pipes, you know, under your road, any type of waterways, little wet weather ponds, fish ponds, anything that holds water, set a dog proof by it. Like I say, I try to target those culvert pipes, you know, ditch intersections and things like that. Uh, and I mean, anywhere you see a raccoon track walking down the road, you can stick one right on the side of the road. I really don't think there's a wrong place to set one.
Mhm.
Um, as far as
Mhm.
going after raccoons and possums, I don't think you can set it in the wrong spot. But like I say, any type of waterway, that's you're gonna nail raccoons on that.
Yeah. Yeah. And here's the thing, for you beginners maybe listening, just because you didn't catch one tonight doesn't mean it's a bad spot.
Yeah.
Right. Just because you didn't catch one in 3 nights doesn't mean it's a bad spot. Because one thing about raccoons and possums and all mammals, they will go through. It's called torpor, TORPER. It's a um, reduced activity phase several times a winter. They can be for a
Mm,
couple hours, it can be for a couple of days. You know, the old timers say, well, the coons are just laid up for a few days. What they're doing
yeah.
is it's like a hibernation, but it's nowhere nearly as intense where they can
Right.
just hole up and just not move. And then the next night you're like, you know, you go 3 or 4 days without catching hardly anything. And then the next day, all your traps are full. Well, I didn't
Right.
do what happened? Well, they woke up and they was hungry.
They got hungry.
They
Yeah.
just woke up and got hungry. Yeah. Yeah. All right. I think more people are fascinated with catching coyotes and bobcats. So let's kind of break that down a little bit, if you don't mind. Um, so I will try to figure out how to ask this. I like to trap roads. When I mean
Yeah.
roads for the listener, that means dirt roads or
Mm,
four wheeler paths or off road stuff, not highways, not paved roads. But if you're
yeah.
on a property and you have all these dirt roads or logging roads or ATV roads, those are the ones that I like to trap first. Tell me
Right.
how you approach a property.
Um, so I kind of the same thing. If I go to a place that I've never trapped before, and a lot of these places I've been trapping them for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, so I know the layout of the property. I know
Mm-hmm.
the spots that catch time and time again. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but if I go somewhere completely blind and I'm scouting, for places to set traps, I'm going to hit intersections, 3 ways and 4 ways, anywhere that the landscape transitions. So if you've got a hardwood bottom bordering, you know, like a mature pine flat, and maybe there's a road that crosses it or a ditch or something like that flows anywhere that land transitions. I like to set those transitional spots. And I tell people all the time, like, think about it like you're deer hunting. If you would hang a deer stand here because the deer, you feel like it's a funnel point or a choke point or, a feeding ground or bedding ground or whatever, I'm like, think about setting a trap like you're deer hunting, because you're basically hunting the same thing that a coyote's hunting. You know, it's the same concept. If you go rabbit
Mm-hmm.
hunting, what are you gonna do? You're gonna go hit the briar thickets, the little trash piles and brush piles and things like that. If you're deer hunting, like I say, you're gonna hunt those oak bottoms that's got acorns in them, and those edges, field edges, things like that. I love setting ag fields, man. And I've found over the last few years, peanuts. If you ever have a place that has a peanut field on it and you don't set traps anywhere else, go set traps in that peanut field.
Mm.
Coyotes eat peanuts. When the peanuts are turned, I've caught a dozen coyotes in one field, over the course of a couple of weeks.
Right.
And
Right.
they're eating peanuts. They're after protein, and a
Yeah.
turned peanut
Yeah.
free protein for them.
Right.
Uh,
Well, let me break
so
that down a little bit because one of the things that early on, I've been trapping for close to 40 years, but
mm,
one of the things when the coyotes first came here and we're trying to learn how to trap coyotes, I'm like, I'm doing the same thing I did for foxes and stuff. I'm like, well, they travel a little bit differently.
yeah,
And so if I'm looking at we'll just use a easy math, a 10-acre field.
mm,
Let's say it's a hay field or even any kind of ag field, but it's not
right,
fallow. We have a 10-acre field. I'm just looking at. I have the road that I'm looking at the field, and I got woods on one side and maybe a road down the other, and it borders a creek. I'm thinking, where do you start? You say trap the field, but what does that mean?
um, so I like to trap where those roads come into the field. If you got a road coming into the field, I always set those. A tree line or a hedgerow or anything. There again, if I'm a deer hunter and I'm trying to sneak into this field without the deer seeing me, I'm gonna look. Hang on a second. I'm gonna look at the areas that I would sneak in through to try to get into that field. That's the areas I'm gonna set. Um, I'm gonna try to trap those tree lines and things. If I'm trying to sneak into that field, a coyote's trying to sneak into that field.
Yeah.
I like the corners, the road entries. You know,
do you put your trap right on the edge, or do you move it into the field some, or what?
I kind of mix it up, man. If you said for instance, a 10-acre field, I would set 2, maybe 3 traps in a 10-acre field.
Okay.
One thing I've found with setting coyotes, trapping coyotes, is you can overdo it. You can put so many traps out there that it kind of overwhelms the coyotes and just shuts them down. So at least that's what I think.
Yeah.
So I try not to overdo it in a spot. Like I say, 10 acres, a 10-acre field, I'd set 2, maybe 3 in there and just let it ride. And I would
Okay.
mix it. I would put one, say it's cut corn. I would put one kind of out in the field a little bit on a corn row. Put one at the road entry, and then maybe one in like a back corner or something like that, and just give them that option, to kind of figure out what they like, where they're traveling, and do something different on every one of those sets. Make a flat set on one, a dirt hole set on another, maybe a double dirt hole or a scent post, or something to mix it up, something to give them that option.
Right.
Just stuff to look at, different stuff to smell. I mean, if you're a trapper, coyotes like multiple smells. As many lures and baits and urines as you can put on it within reason is what you want.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you ever gang set? You get to a good spot and then say, well, let's put 3 traps in this 20-foot area right here.
Yeah, I do. And at least where I live, it hadn't been overly productive doing that. There's been a time or two where I've caught doubles, but not that often. Maybe this time of year, it's breeding season for the coyotes. You get lucky and catch a double, but for the most part, it's a single, here and there.
Yeah, same. Caught a few doubles in my career, but never a triple. I've set 3 in at a loading deck on a fresh logging area. I'll put 3 or 4 in there just to see if I can, because I don't know how they're really approaching it. I saw a video the other day on Instagram. This guy is walking up to his traps. He had 13 coyotes in the frame, all of them caught up. It never would have crossed my mind to put more than 3.
Yeah, that was in Kansas. I think that was the Coyote Academy that put that video up.
Yeah, that's a lot of coyotes.
Yeah. I know some boys that trap Kansas every year, and they've told me, they said, man, you don't even have to use gloves out there. There's so many coyotes that you just set traps and catch coyotes. You can put one blind in the middle of the road with some urine on it, and you'll catch coyotes.
That sounds like a road trip coming up.
Yeah, I need to make that happen.
I'd love to do that. I would love to go do that. But I mean, again, how would you think to even set? Well, let's just put 15 right here in this little opening. I mean, good gracious. I mean, never would. And you're going to have overlaps as far as scents and smells and stuff. And, I just don't get that. But I'm like you here in South Carolina. I do some gang setting, but they're not really close. They may be on opposite sides of the road in case the wind's different, or they may be in, like I said, in a loading deck, which is about a 3/4 of an acre open area. Then there may be 2 or 3 in there, but it's not
I
heavy.
would never set more than, I don't know, like 25 feet apart is pushing it. As far as being too close. I don't know. I probably give a coyote more credit than he's really worth, but
yeah.
With all the scent footprint, the scent traffic, and everything that you leave and all, I'm like, I just want to set a trap and get in and get out as quick as I can, and just let it work.
Yeah. What's your go-to trap?
MB 450.
450.
Yep.
I'm a 550 offset. 550 offset. That's my go-to.
I don't mind the 550s. My biggest thing is, Pete, I'm commercial, so I have to have a lot of traps. At certain points in the year, I'll have 250 to 300 traps running. So I got to be
as economical with it as I can. And the 550s, you bought them, you know how expensive they are. The 450s are just as good of a trap for a little less money. The boxes that I use to put my traps in, I can put about 30 or maybe 35 550s in them. I can put 55 450s in a box. So it kind of saves space, saves money. They're the same quality of trap.
Just a little bit smaller.
I do just as well with them as I do with the 550s.
Okay.
I've converted.
I just don't have any. I don't have any 450s. I got everything I have is 550s. I found them, and I'm like, I love this trap, and that's all I'm ever gonna buy. You know.
Yeah.
But you're not the first person to tell me that the 450 is a great trap, and I need to consider it. But I don't have any foxes here at all.
Really?
I've never caught a fox on these properties, so I'm like, well, why do I want to go smaller? I'm catching cats and coyotes on these, so. But I'm not running 250 traps at a time either.
Right. That was part of the reason that I started looking at the smaller traps. I used to be Bridger all the way through and through. Ran number 2s for years, and I hope there's no anti-trappers out there listening, but I had a few fox, and it wasn't the trap that did it. It was just this little tiny 6 or 8 pound fox fighting with this big trap on his foot, and it broke a leg.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm like, man, we're going to shoot these things at the end of the day, but you still don't want an animal to suffer any more than it has to.
That's right.
So I was like, I need to find an option, because it was just a big hunk of metal.
It is. It's a big trap. That's a big trap. Yeah.
So I dropped down to the Bridger 175s, and they needed a lot of work. They needed a lot of tuning, filing, bending the pan, a lot of adjustments. And I got 450s, and it was like, man, these things are ready to go out the box. Like, you don't have
literally.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, you can take it out of the box and throw it in the ground.
So that, and the fact they were just a lot tougher, it seemed like the metal was a better quality and everything. I was like, well, so I started, replacing 175s with 450s. I've almost completely converted to 450s now.
Yeah, I got a ton of traps I no longer use because I found the MVs. I'm like, what am I gonna do with all these things, man? I'll never use them. I got them hanging up for decoration. That's what I got them to use them for. That might not be a bad idea. We could sell them to antique stores who will sell them for decorations. Wow. All right. So bobcats, if you're targeting cats, which to me is my favorite animal to catch, because I don't have foxes, so I can't even play with those. But I love catching bobcats. I think, and it may be just me, I'm not a good trapper. I think they're harder to catch than coyotes are. And maybe too, there's not as many of them. I don't know, but tell me your experience with bobcats.
Man, I've had people comment on my videos and stuff before. They're like, "You're a bobcat god," and I'm like, "No, I'm not. I just trap where there's lots of bobcats." Yeah, we just have a lot of. And I have some places that I trap. They're like, "We want you to catch bobcats." And some of these places, the guys that work there, they're trappers, or they have traps, so they ride around and they see my sets and they're like, "That's not a bobcat set." And I'm like, "Well, define a bobcat set." And they're like, "Well, you're supposed to hang feathers in the trees and CDs and stuff like that." And I'm like, "Yeah, but that's not going to catch a coyote." So I'm always mindful of, I want my trap to be able to catch a coyote no matter what I'm targeting.
Right.
So targeting a bobcat, say somebody's got one on a trail camera, or I see tracks or scat or something. The only thing I do different is I'll make a double dirt hole set, and I will make it obnoxiously visible. Where you could see it all the way across the field. And I got a couple of baits and lures that I use specifically to target bobcats. Catmandu's one. I think think that's a Milligan's bait. Milligan's
I think
Catman
you're
dude.
right. I think you're right.
Yep. And then Voodoo. Voodoo's a Fox Hollow, I think.
It is.
Yeah, Voodoo and Catman, regardless of who makes them, that's my go-to for bobcats.
Okay.
And like just something obnoxiously visible that'll still allow a coyote to not be scared off from.
Yeah. Yeah. My go-to on cats is Hiawatha and beaver castor.
Yep. Well, that Catmandu's got a lot of beaver castor in it.
Oh, does
you
it?
can,
Okay.
Yeah. When that jar gets down a little bit, you can smell that castor in there.
Yeah. Yeah. And see, I'm a beaver trapper mostly, so I got plenty of castor.
Right.
Okay. I got plenty of castor, so I don't even have to go buy it. I just make my own. And if anybody wants to know how, you can email me and I'll tell you how I make it. Won't waste time on that. But yeah, I love catching cats. Again, I don't trap large properties like you do, but when I was living in Greenville, there were not near as many cats as there are here in the Midlands, and there's even more down in the Low Country, even the ag areas where you are. I have no ag around me, so it makes it a lot harder to do that. What would you say? All right, let me erase that. So I was looking on Instabook the other day, and somebody posted fur prices in 1976. Did you see that?
No, I missed out. I know they were better than what.
Oh my gosh, I'm gonna see if I can find it real quick while I'm talking to you. And it was the Sackline Trappers Association shared it as well. I'm looking at my phone here real quick. There it is. Ain't it? Anyway, I can't remember, but it was the 1976 prices. And as an example, I do remember this. And to convert that to today's dollars, multiply it by 5.5 is what it said. Okay. In today's dollars, a red fox in 76 would sell for $500. A beaver was selling for $325. Raccoons were bringing 180. I mean,
that's
can
in
you
modern.
believe that?
Yeah.
That is crazy money.
When I was in high school, Pete, which has been how long we been out of school?
20 years.
20-something years now. 2004. I trapped otters. Beavers and otters is kind of how I got started trapping, and then kind of morphed lamb trapping stuff. And I mean, we would sell green otter hides, and for those of you that don't know, green just means skinned, like no fleshing, stretching, nothing like that.
Yeah.
Me and my dad would sell green otter hides for anywhere from 75 to 110 a piece.
Yeah.
But that was the only good fur market then, and I'd say that was in the late 90s to early 2000.
And somewhere around 2012 they were bringing 100 for a very brief period, like 1 year,
and then it just took a nose.
I found the list. So of course we got to do the math. But beaver was averaging $30 times 5.5. What's that come up to? 150?
A little over 150 ish, somewhere in
there. 30 times 5.5. Yeah, 165 for a beaver fur. Average price. This is the average price.
Yep.
All right. Coons, $20.80 times 5.5, $115 for a coon. $115. What do we get now?
$8.50.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. All right. So where's the they don't have bobcat on here. Coyote was 48.66 times 5.5. $270 for a coyote fur.
Yeah, I've never even attempted to sell a coyote fur because they're
you can't. Yeah, we can't sell them. Yeah. Well, here's the thing. As somebody told me when I was out in Montana, we're trying to sell South Carolina fur competing with a Minnesota or Montana fur. nobody will buy it. I mean, the fur on a Montana coyote is going to be 4 inches. Ours is going to be 3/8 of an inch.
Yeah.
Nobody. I mean, why would you buy a South Carolina coyote fur when you can buy a Montana fur?
Yeah, and
You know?
and I've had older trappers tell me that. They said, man, if you do try to sell it on the market, he said 90% of our South Carolina furs they'll get rejected.
Mm-hmm.
Because they just don't have that quality that those northern
they don't.
have.
They don't. No, I mean, yeah, bobcats and otters is where the money still is. Still not very much, but that's where the money still is.
What
You
is it
know,
now?
and
Probably what, 20, 25 bucks
otters
maybe.
I saw the other day. Now this is flesh. This isn't green. An otter was bringing about 30, 32. You know, stretched in flesh, and the bobcats were doing better. That they were into 40, 45 range, depending on the spots. You know, it's all about the stomach spots, right?
Yep.
It's all about that. That's why we can't really compete. Plus, ours don't get as big as they do in the Midwest.
Right.
You know, a 60-pound bobcat in Nebraska is normal.
Yeah.
If we catch a 30-pounder, it's a giant.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. I've caught 3 bobcats in my entire life that weighed over 30 pounds, and they were like 31.
Yeah, I've never caught one that big. I've never caught one that big. I think my biggest was actually this year, and it was 24 and change. You know, we just don't. Again, we live in the South. They don't have to put on all that fat and all that kind of stuff on them. So,
Yeah, I've
man,
seen raccoons in South Dakota 35 pounds.
Raccoons?
You know? Yeah, out in South Dakota.
And how much do ours weigh?
Yeah, but I mean,
how
they
much
just have corn and soybeans.
Yeah, how much do the ones here weigh though? Raccoon, just for comparison to the listener. 10 pounds, 11, 15?
10 to 15 is probably your average. I mean, if you get a 20-pound coon around here, you're like, wow, that's a big coon.
A giant. That's a giant. Yeah. Yeah. I think the biggest I've actually weighed, I've caught some pretty big ones, but I haven't weighed them all, was in the 18-pound range. And I thought that was a mega giant, you know, and then you see pictures, like you say, of 35 and 40-pound coons. And good gracious, that would be so much fun. I'd hate to flesh a 40-pound coon with all that fat they have on them. Good.
Yeah.
I think a raccoon is the most disgusting animal to skin there ever was. I do.
I quit fooling up with fur a few years ago just because there wasn't. And I mean, it's not all about the money, but and not to brag, but I may come home with 30 raccoons in the truck, and sometimes, and I'm like, no, I'm not skinning 30 raccoons tonight.
That's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, you know. I shared a video with my son today of a guy who caught 3,000 in one season, and he's a college student doing it before classes. He caught 3,000. He said, "This is my 3,000th coon." He was in hold on, where was he? Iowa.
Yeah.
That is amazing. The amount of work that go, and he was putting them all up and selling the fur. Putting them all up. All right, we are digressing. I know the listeners don't care anything at all about this. Bill, this trapping, I could talk forever about. I love it. It is a deep passion. And I have told people many times, if I had to give up hunting, fishing, or trapping, I would keep trapping.
Yeah.
I mean, I love to hunt. Everybody knows I love to hunt and I love to fish, but there's just something about trapping. It's a lot more work than the other two. But to me, the challenge and the reward is far more worth it. You know, and we both get to do it for a living under different circumstances.
Right.
It's awesome. So you know, this is Christian Outdoors, as we said in the beginning, and one of the things that we are passionate about is also our faith in Jesus, and how important that is to us as well. And I've seen on your videos that you like to share scriptures and occasionally share some thoughts on that. So would you mind sharing with the listeners your faith story? As we said in the beginning, you grew up in church, but share with us about that whole journey, if you would.
Yeah. So, you know, growing up in church, everybody down south goes to church when you're a kid. And it's just part of life. I mean, Baptist, Methodist, something. You're going to go to church on Sunday. And I did that growing up. We lived a mile or two from our church, and my mom and dad were active. Dad sang in the choir, played guitar, different stuff like that. My mom was a Sunday school teacher. And we went to church. We were there almost every time the door's open. And when I was about 11, 12, somewhere in there, my Sunday school teacher was like, hey, you're getting around that age, you need to start thinking about salvation. So I went through the motions of salvation at an early age, going before the church, giving my life to the Lord, going through baptism. But I really don't think I had as clear of an understanding as I should have. And it's no knock on my Sunday school teacher for leading me through that. I just, looking back on it now, I know that I didn't really grasp salvation. I didn't really understand the process or what I was doing. I was just doing this because I'm hitting that age and you need to do it. And it wasn't long after that, my parents split up and we just kind of got out of church. Only the occasional trip there was normal. And heck, I don't know, up until 2014, I thought I was as saved as they made them. But I definitely was not living a Christian life by any stretch of the imagination. I was the furthest thing from the example of a Christian as humanly possible. I fell into a lot of stuff that, and this is not a plug for my channel, but if you go to my YouTube channel, my full testimony's on there. It's a early video I did. I don't know, probably the 8th or 10th video that I have on my channel is my full testimony with all the gory detail. But just a series of events back in 2014 led me to start reading the Bible. I had a little pocket Gideon's Bible, and that was, my youngest son was about a year old, and he had some issues when he was born. Nothing life altering or anything like that, but he had some things going on that, just kind of didn't necessarily make me question God. It didn't make me question his existence. I always knew that God was real. I always believed in Jesus, but I at this point had never really fully trusted him as my Lord. And I was reading this little pocket Gideon's Bible one night at work. I was a millwright for about 12 or 13 years at a industrial factory in Savannah. And I was sitting at work one night, probably 2 o'clock in the morning. I read the book of John, and John's got one of the more descriptive recollections of the crucifixion than the rest of the Gospels, in my opinion. And I read it. The Lord had been working on me. He'd been revealing himself to me through different things, different events, and just, I don't know. I read that book of John, and I just thought, I was like, if somebody's willing to do that for all the bad things that I've done, the least I can do is serve him. Is to give my life to Christ and try to live up to his example. Try to make his sacrifice worth his while on my behalf.
Right.
So I mumbled a salvation prayer under my breath, and I didn't really have any plans on changing my lifestyle at that point. And I mean, I was a very heavy drinker at that time. And it was about 3 days later, I tied one on. I mean, a good one, and I woke up the next day, and Pete, I've had hangovers like every day for years. I've woke up with hangovers, and I woke up that morning, and it was the worst one I'd ever had in my life. And I felt like the Lord was saying, all right, like, you made this dedication to me and it was real. and I'm going to show you how real it was. And I quit. I dried up for 9-10 years. And maybe it's not, I don't want to lie to anybody. Maybe it's not the right thing now, but I will take a drink from time to time, an occasional beer or two, but I try to limit myself. But I had a problem back then. I really did.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was my lifestyle, was drinking.
Mm-hmm.
And it's certainly not now. But the devil knows our weaknesses. The Lord knows our strengths. And I think when I do have a drink now, I don't know. I don't know why I do it. it's just one of those.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. All right. And now, since that event in 2014, how has that decision changed your life besides the drinking?
Man, I'm not going to say that I hold hands with Jesus and skip through the tulips every day, because that's not what salvation's about. It doesn't fix everything. You know what I'm saying? It's
Not at all. Not at all.
A lot of people think that it's just, you're like, all my problems are going to go away. And no, sometimes they get worse. You know, the devil starts working on you harder, I think, sometimes when you're a threat to him.
Yeah.
I'd honestly say, Pete, the biggest thing is stress. That's like, I used to stress over money, finances. I mean, everybody does. You're married, you got kids, you got money problems. I don't care how much money you make, you're worried about money. Mm-hmm. Things like that don't bother me anymore. I don't. I know that I'm gonna be taken care of, and the Bible says that God will see to your needs, not your wants, and in layman's terms,
Right.
And I don't know, just not a lot bothers me. Yeah.
So you have more of a peace about your whole life now. More
Pretty much.
about a lot of the stress is gone. I mean, again, as Christians, as you just said, Bill, we know that things aren't going to be skipping through the tulips with Jesus. That was funny. I'm going to use that a lot. Okay. We're going to, that's not what it's about. It's about an eternal salvation, a hope that, that we have eternal life with him, an assurance that we have continual forgiveness for our sins, because we continue to sin. Just because we're saved doesn't mean we're not sinners. I mean, Paul said that very well. That I'm the worst sinner of all. Paul said. I think I would beat him on that. But that no matter how hard we try, we still sin. It's just our nature. As being the seeds of Adam, we still sin, and God continues to forgive us of those sins, and continues to offer us hope and love and protection and guidance, and that assurance, that blessed assurance that he loves us unconditionally. Yeah.
It's
so how did it impact your family?
Tremendously. My boys were really young around that time, but we got involved in church. We got super involved in church. It's probably only a year, maybe 2, that I got ordained as a deacon in the church. I'm inactive now, but I was. And my wife got saved, I don't know, a year or so after me. Both the kids have been saved, baptized, everything along those lines. I know I probably don't do it as often as I should, but I definitely try to teach my kids things. When you got that moment of that valuable life lesson, I try to throw a scripture at them, or, hey, this is just like what Peter or Paul or John, or, this is similar to what these people went through in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
This is how they reacted to it. And I trust me, I don't always have the best reaction to things, you know. I mean,
well, we're human beings still, you know.
like my pastor said, he said I was a man before I was a Christian, so
Yeah,
you
yeah.
still react to stuff like you would, you know, in your old body, I guess. But yeah, it definitely impacted our family, man, in a positive way. You know, it just changed it changed everything. It changed our lifestyle. Um, it changed our marriage. I mean, as far as, you know, understanding like the levels of love. You know, you got God, spouse, children. You know, I never knew that. Uh, I never considered that. It taught me. I can tell you, it really taught me how to love my wife. Um, and I'm not going to say I had a disrespectful type of love for my wife before, but when I understood the love that Jesus had for me and read the scripture and understood the scripture that said, I'm to love my wife like Christ loved the church, that sacrificial, undying, unconditional love, like that, it changed the way I looked at my wife.
Yeah.
You know, just knowing how I was supposed to love her.
Right. Right.
Not, I didn't love her before, because I absolutely did. Otherwise, I wouldn't have married her. But you know, it gave an understanding of love all across the board: family, friends, everything.
You know, I've said this before on other shows, Bill. But I feel compelled to say it again. Is um, there's some statistics that talk about when dads are saved, and when dads take their families to church versus when moms do and dad doesn't. And some of the statistics, which you may know them, but the listeners may not. They may be hearing this for the first time. So I'd like to kind of share some of those. Is that if a mom takes their children to church without dad, there's a 17% chance those children will grow up to be believers and continue in church. If dad takes the family to church, there's a 93% chance that that the whole family will become believers and stay active in church. And, you know, I think a lot of men in today's society, especially when you get to be my age, you start thinking about your legacy. What are you leaving? What are you leaving your children? What kind of impact are you making on the world? All those kind of things. And the greatest thing you can ever give your family is a relationship with Jesus Christ. That's more important than homes or cars or land or money. Put them into relationship with Christ, and you do that by taking them to church. You do that by being an example of what Christ needs us to be,
Right.
and that is the most important thing we can do as men, is to lead our families into relationship with Christ. And that's why I asked you, how did it impact your family? I was just curious about that.
Yeah. It took a while, you know, and I didn't want to, for lack of a better term, make the same mistake with my kids as I made as a young man going through the salvation process. I wanted to make sure that they really understood what they were doing, at least to the maximum capacity they could as
Right.
children. You know,
Yeah, it's a growing process. Yeah.
and that's the thing. It never stops. Just because you're 90 years old and you've been saved since you were 13, it's a work in progress till the day they put you in the ground.
Yep. Yep.
And I see things in my kids that I know that it's working. You know what I'm saying? I know they're using Christ in their lives, as far as how they treat people, uh, their level of respect. I don't want to brag on my kids too much because they might hear me, but I mean, they're
Nothing
good
wrong with
kids.
that, man.
They're really good kids, and I mean, I ride them pretty hard, but you know, I get a lot of compliments on my kids and how respectful they
Good.
are and things like that. And I know that's got to do with parenting, but that's also got to do with just having a reverent respect for people that I think reflects your reverent respect and love and fear of God.
Right. 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 And being a good Southern man, we understand manners and the importance of manners.
Right.
Like they don't understand in other parts of the world, and it just blows my mind that and a little saying of mine, and I'll get off my soapbox, but good manners will open more doors than a battering ram will. If you
Pete,
have
I
good
lost your
manners.
audio.
Hello, you still there?
Man, I can barely hear you. I don't know
I
what
can hear
happened.
you. Yeah, I can hear you well. But good manners will open more doors than anything else that you can do. So,
Yep.
Bill, I appreciate you taking the time to be on the show. I really do. Why don't you tell the listeners how they can find you on social media and on your YouTube channel?
Yep. So on YouTube, it is, oh Lord, I changed it so many times I don't even remember. Coastal Carolina Outdoors is
Coastal.
YouTube, and Instagram is just Coastal Atlanta Wildlife Services. You can probably search my name on Instagram and find it, but Coastal
Yeah,
Land
there's
and
only one or
Wildlife
two
Services
Bill
on it.
Smiths out there. There's only one or two Bill Smiths out there. It's not
Yeah,
like
I'm sure it's not that common of a name. Yeah.
Coastal Carolina Outdoors.
Yep.
Okay, because I'm gonna put links to this in the show notes. So I want to make sure I get it right.
Gotcha.
All right, Bill Smith of Coastal Land and Wildlife Services here in South Carolina. We talk about trapping and we talk about Jesus, and he has a great YouTube channel if you're ever interested in trapping, particularly coyotes is what he tends to focus on the most. If you're interested in that, he has a great channel. He's a really good instructor on what he's doing, and I appreciate you taking the time to be on the show today, Bill.
All right, Pete. I appreciate it, man. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, man. You have a good day.
All right, buddy. Thank you.